Hi, today I'm joined by Heidi McElnea, who is a regional coordinator for the Community Power Agency, who have just released a guide on building better biodiversity on solar farms. Hi, Heidi. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Anna.
Could you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and the new guide that the organization's just released?
So I live in the New England tableland bioregion. I've been working with Community Power Agency in over the last couple of years to fill a gap, really, a sort of a change management role to work with community and other stakeholders to help them to become more involved in the renewable energy projects that are being planned and constructed in this New England renewable energy zone, and together to find ways to address the potential social and environmental impacts of this new land use. And one of the things that, in my kind of first phase of listening, one of the things that was coming up a lot was the conflict between land use and the concern that if we are in a renewable energy zone where there's going to be concentrated projects, what's the overall impact going to be on biodiversity? And I guess a concern that our current legislation doesn't really look at those cumulative impacts. They're sort of addressing them on a project by project basis. And that really kickstarted us to look at how we can turn that around.
And in the development of this guide, you worked with farmers, developers, ecologists, researchers, Landcare, cultural knowledge holders. Can you give us some insight into what the process of collaboration looked like?
Yeah, well, it certainly started off, as I said, with with listening and then conversations, trying to understand from different perspectives what the concerns were and what potentially the opportunities were. Um, so I sort of, have had the privilege to be able to speak to people who were involved with one solar farm project up here, which during its environmental impact statement and sort of scoping phases, they uncovered a ceremonial ground that the local Anouan people hadn't been able to access for 70 years, but it was a story that they always knew that out there was this space where people would make and sharpen their tools and different ceremonies were held. So learning that through this process, I guess this new land use, actually one of the valuable things that came out of that was a reconnection to country for these people who had been disconnected from this space, but through new agreements were engaged to manage the site and other land around it, as well as to be able to bring people out to the site. And I suppose also speaking with ecologists who were doing a lot of assessment on particularly the solar farm projects that were being planned, actually sort of realizing, at least in this region, many of the project sites that are chosen to host solar farms are already cleared largely, and they've generally been heavily grazed for many years. So the land itself has a very low biodiversity score at the outset. And we started looking at drawing together, I guess, some of the low hanging fruit. Like if you're a developer coming into this space, you want to take stock off at least for a period of time while you are, constructing the solar farm. What other opportunities, as well as resting that land from grazing, can you take? And so things like restoring the creeks, erosion lines, gullies, rivers. Also looking at working with rocky outcrops to revegetate, to make them better for habitat or enhance them for habitat or forage space for small birds and things like that. So, and there's a bit of a correlation. Ground cover, of course, is really important for solar panels in that it produces dust. It also sort of moderates the heat, so it doesn't get too hot if you've got a nice good ground layer, because PV panels only, once they get too hot, they become less efficient. So there sort of seem to be some natural sort of correlations, whereas where improving biodiversity fits in quite well with the solar farm model. And from there, we just continued the conversations, because it was really bringing together a lot of people's expertise in a lot of different areas to pull together, I guess, the guide that is attempting to support and offer guidance in this new area, which has not really been defined before.
What are the benefits of partnering a regenerative project with solar, with agriculture, for all of those elements, I guess?
Yeah, I think rather than viewing it as a single land use or a land use change from one thing like agriculture to solar, to be able to look at it in a more holistic way, I suppose, and think, well, it is serving one purpose here to harness energy, but what are the other opportunities? So certainly grazing works quite well under solar panels as a vegetation management tool, but can we do that in a way where we're moving stock from paddock to paddock more regularly? We're not overgrazing areas. Ground cover, of course, assists with things like heat and dust, but also managing water across the site, so you're less likely to get additional erosion and things like that. Fixing up, actually addressing those areas of erosion on a block is also sort of going to cause help with stability for the infrastructure as well. And there's a natural, from studies we've been working with UNE, particularly Dr. Eric Nordberg there, and his study is around how animals respond to a solar farm environment. And certainly the protection offered by the panels, offer variations of temperature, moisture, and enable a greater number of species to thrive there, as opposed to if it was just a bare paddock. So there's definitely a lot of correlation and opportunity to make all of those things work together well.
A win-win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it helps developers moving through the approval phase if they can demonstrate that they are taking a stewardship approach to the land, and it will be left in a better condition than they found it in.
And that brings me to the question of what does this look like in your kind of vision of developing this guide? How does it integrate with planning and the systems of government and approvals and solar farm development?
Absolutely. I mean, the planning system, I suppose, is still sort of running to catch up. I guess it wasn't designed necessarily for these kind of projects. It isn't necessarily the same as, clearing, mining, for example, or clearing the site and constructing warehouses or any other sort of large infrastructure. So I suppose we're looking to find opportunities to incentivize developers to do best practice, I suppose. So, for example, if they can avoid, if there are areas of good quality native ground cover already on a site, then rather than just excavate, scrape that soil off, then we're encouraging developers to retain that, perhaps just use a roller. They can still, it still might be suitable for putting panels over, but just to, I guess, be more aware of and more supported to acknowledge all of the places where they can protect and improve biodiversity rather than negatively impact it. Yeah, so I guess it would be really good to see, and I suppose just incentivizing them as well to do more work on their sites or on neighbouring sites. So use their biodiversity offset credits as locally as possible, rather than just say paying them to the Biodiversity Conservation Trust, which could then be offset, quite a couple of 100 Ks this way or 100 Ks that way. To do as much as they can, to get involved as possible in the land management of that site with the people who know that area, the people in that community, whether it's Landcare groups or local tree nurseries or First Nations people. There's so many opportunities to work collaboratively for stewardship of that site.
And have you seen the kind of indication that this is something that that the developers you've spoken to and worked with are interested in bringing this into reality for their projects?
Yeah, we've had a lot of interest from developers, some who had already begun to realise the opportunity, I suppose, and were aware, I guess, how important it is for them to be role models, I suppose, in that space and try to raise the bar. So there are some companies already looking to do this kind of thing, but they didn't have much to help them do this. And I suppose in talking to them as well now, there's a big demand to sort of, if they're looking at implementing some of these improvements on their site, being able to connect with local people who have the skills and experience, but also some familiarity with that sort of solar farm environment, so they can actually roll out these improvements. So, I think that's maybe it's, kick-started something that has been spiraling around in lots of heads for a while. And I think we just really hope that with the next stage, we'll see this become, something of the norm for projects, not just in the New England and the Hunter and across New South Wales, but anywhere across Australia.
Yeah, great. Speaking of the Hunter, Nature Conservation Council is holding our regional conference there with the theme of at the coalface of the transition, and you will be appearing on a panel there. I'm wondering what the message you're hoping to bring to the Hunter Central Coast will be.
Well, I think the time is so right for regions like the Hunter who have put up with coal, the impacts of coal mining for such a long time, to finally be able to see a future where that is not so, is not impacting the region so much. But it's the opportunity for us to get together and have conversations, exactly as you and I, Anna, have been having here today. But how do we make sure we do this as well as we can? How do we make sure that, on one hand, renewable energy will significantly reduce the effect of climate change, or certainly the carbon emissions, which is certainly going to positively benefit all of the impacts, I suppose, that our regions are starting to see in terms of weather extremes, bushfire, drought, floods. How do we balance that with ensuring that on a local level we are still caring for the land, the wildlife, the vegetation of that land as well? So I think it's going to be a really fruitful discussion. It's really timely, and I'm sure that it will really help people be armed with tools and strategies and connections, so that together we can go out and make it happen in a way that builds resilience into the land, as well as generating energy.
Amazing. Thanks so much for joining me, Heidi. It's been great to have a chat about all of this, and I look forward to seeing your panel at the regional conference.
Great, Anna. Thanks so much for the talk.